Okay, you're good.
All right. Thank you for taking your time to watch this video. My name is Laura Reed, and I will be going through some of the Colorado Access requirements. If you have further questions of things that maybe are not shared on this video, please feel free to contact myself or Carl, and we will best support you as much as we can. So we'll go ahead and get started and just talk about, well, before I get started, there is a PowerPoint of my presentation that I'll be giving on the Google Drive, and so if you want to follow along there, or if you have more questions later, please know that you have access to that, and that could be a good benefit. And there's also some very important phone numbers on the PowerPoint that will be shared for your information that you can share with clients. All right, we will go ahead and get started, and hopefully today, by the end of the training, I'm hoping that you will have a better understanding of Colorado Access requirements and really behavioral health requirements, as well as a better understanding and comprehension of our personal heart-centered counseling policies and procedures, and be able to put that knowledge into practice with your clients. Some of the stuff that I'll be sharing may feel overwhelming. Please let us know if you do feel overwhelmed or if you have any questions about things, because it can be a lot of paperwork and a lot of things that you may not be used to doing. So please communicate with us again if you have any questions or concerns, or feelings of overwhelmed with the information that I'll be sharing with you. We're doing this really to prepare ourselves to make sure that we are serving our clients the best as possible, as well as to prepare ourselves for a potential upcoming audit within for Colorado Access. But we also just want to know that we are following the guidelines that are needed, as well as providing the best service for our clients. So in the PowerPoint, you will see that I have added the values of Access Behavioral Health, and you can just go through those. The reason why I thought it was important to include those is I feel pretty privileged and pretty lucky and blessed to be able to work here at Heart-Centered Counseling. I feel that the counselors that I work with, my coworkers, are very compassionate, are very open, do really good work for their clients, and the values that Colorado Access holds, I believe that we hold as well. And so I was just trying to make a parallel with that. So go ahead and take some time to look through those if you desire, because I do feel that we hold those as well as a organization within ourselves. So I will go ahead and start talking about what happens when a client reaches out who has Colorado Access insurance, and so I kind of want to go through the whole span of what it looks like from the very beginning to the very end of communication, paperwork, necessities, requirements that are needed with clients who have Colorado Access insurance. So what happens when a client reaches out? They call our first contact team, are the amazing staff that schedule everything, do the verification of benefits, and it is a requirement that within 7 days from their first contact, they are offered an appointment. Sometimes we know that they may be offered an appointment with a therapist, but their schedule may not work with the therapist's schedule, but it's really important to know that we've offered the appointment within 7 days. Some clients call in and say, you know, I don't really want to start for a couple weeks, and so their actual first appointment may not be for 2 weeks from now, but we have offered them that appointment. Our first contact team keeps track of all of that information, and so if there's any questions about that, the first contact team keeps a log of when they've talked to someone, when they've offered appointments, and when the appointment was scheduled. So they have information about all that if you have any questions. So clients come in and they may have different expectations and questions about what it's like to be in therapy, or if they've been in therapy before, they come in with expectations of what they've experienced before. But Colorado Access also has expectations of us as therapists and as Heart-Centered Counseling as an organization as a whole. So I'm going to be going through those expectations now. So at the beginning of our therapeutic relationship with any client, the records and documentation are really important from the very start. And so I'll go through all the things that are required within a document. So the requirement is a consent and a disclosure, an assessment and intake, The CCAR, for every Medicaid client, CCAR is required. Diagnosis and reasoning for the diagnosis, so to be able to back up clinically why you gave someone a diagnosis. A treatment plan or an individualized service plan. And then if there's any notes that you have of working with any outside services or outside resources, that also needs to be documented in a progress note or a quick note of some kind in therapy appointment. And then confidentiality and our HIPAA agreement, so that also the HIPAA agreement and acknowledgement needs to be in someone's chart as well. So we'll go through each of those things individually. So for the consent and disclosure, everyone needs to have a consent for treatment. And that can be on the disclosure as well. The disclosure just gives information about your license, your credentials, as well as the rights of the clients. You can use the disclosure and consent form that we have on our Google Drive and cater it to your individual needs, or if you have one of your own that you've used that you would like to use, that's fine too. It just needs to have all the same information. So the disclosure also talks about the rights of each client, and it's really important to know that, to make the client aware that they have rights and where to find them, and possibly go over them briefly in your first appointment. And it also talks about the grievance procedure and numbers. So if a client has any questions or concerns about your practice individually or as a practice as heart-centered counseling, there's information under our disclosures and consent of how to write a grievance, either if that's to DORA or even to heart-centered counseling or Access Behavioral. Access Behavioral has their own consent and disclosure, and so it's important to be able to use both of those when you're working with an Access client. So make sure that you're using your own disclosure that gives information about you, as well as the Access disclosure that gives the information about clients' rights who have Access Behavioral Health as their insurance, as well as emergency contact information for Access Behavioral is on that Access disclosure. Excuse me. So after you go through that and have a client sign the consent, then an assessment and intake can start. We do have an assessment and intake form, and that is on our Google Drive as well. It is pretty long and pretty thorough, but it's helpful because it helps us know that we are getting as much information as needed, especially the first time that we meet with a client. It does take some time to fill out the paperwork, so I would suggest encouraging your clients to come early to fill out the paperwork, or make the paperwork available somehow for your clients before they come in. On therapy appointment, which I'll call TA from here on out, there's you can make your own notes. So therapy appointment has a lot of different tools that are amazing. I like the HIPAA notes or the SOAP notes because it asks for everything in a SOAP note. Everything that's asked for is exactly what Access Behavioral is asking for. So it talks about treatment goals, it talks about strengths, it talks about any areas of growth that a client may have. It talks about what symptoms that a client may have been experiencing, and from week to week, the SOAP notes will go from week to week, so it'll pull from the week before, so you don't have to redo everything. HIPAA notes are the same. It's just really beneficial. I have found it beneficial with my clients because it makes sure that you have all the information for all of your notes that Access is requiring in the note. Sometimes if I'm just doing a regular progress note myself and don't have that template, I'll forget something, and so those templates really help. You can also make your own template on TA, but just make sure it has all the information that's needed for Access. Also, if you have a different intake form that you use, but it has all the same information that's on the intake form that we provide, feel free to use that too. We just want to make sure that people have access to an intake form that has all the requirements that Colorado Access is looking for. So after your first appointment, within 3 weeks of your first appointment, by the 3rd week, you need to fill out your CCAR. All the information from the CCAR that you'll need is on the is on the intake form that we have on our Google Drive. So if you're using that one, you don't necessarily need to give the first page of the C-card to the client, because you can get all the information off of the assessment and intake that you gave them before. So within the first 3 appointments, you need to complete the C-card. Everyone who gets a C-card login, you're emailed also the manual and different requirements and trainings. So I'm not going to be doing a training on C-card today because you have access to that, and I'm kind of trusting that you've looked at that and gone through that. We are hoping to be able to provide more training for C-cards in the future, but that's just not this training that we're doing today. And then for a diagnosis in the person's chart, like I said, just make sure that the reason for a diagnosis and how long someone has been experiencing certain symptoms is in the chart in some capacity, to be able to properly document why someone is diagnosed with whatever you diagnose them with. That's really important to be able to have. If there's any changes in a diagnosis at all, it does require a new C-card. So if there's any changes in the person's life, a diagnosis, changes in their ability to perform their daily living activities, that all requires a new C-card. And then we'll also talk about treatment plans. And so treatment plans are individualized service plans. We do have a form from Colorado Access, and for all of our Colorado Access clients, I suggest using their forms that they provide. So this form is the individualized service plan from Colorado Access. There's a couple things that I want to make sure that I point out with our treatment plans. That's very important. That is a huge goal and important for Colorado Access. So the treatment plans need to be specific goals based on the diagnosis and the assessment that you've given the client prior. It has to be strength-based, and so there's an opportunity on the form from Colorado Access to talk about what are some of the strengths and resources and supports that the client has. And it's always important to hear that from them. What are your strengths? What resources do you have? To be able to put it in their words what their strengths are. Now, what it means to have a strengths-based goal is you're using the words for one of their strengths. So if someone is creative, you're using that word in the actual goal that you make. And so this client is using the strength of creativity to blah blah blah, whatever the goal may be. But the goals have to be tied back into the strengths that you wrote up above. They have to be gender appropriate. They have to be individually directed, and so you can't have the same goals for all your same clients. And try to make the goals, if you can put the goals into the client's words themselves, what the client says themselves, that's even better. So it has to be gender appropriate, individually directed. It also has to be take into consideration the age or development of the client, just to make sure that the client is understanding what is being said, what the goal is, and what we're working towards together. If you have any more questions about treatment plans, please let me know. Treatment plans need to be done within the first month of seeing a client, and they have to be redone at any time of a diagnosis change, any time of a change in daily living activities, or or 12 months. So if some of those changes haven't happened before, we need to be doing a new treatment plan every 12 months. With the new treatment plan, there's also a new C-card. I think I said that before, but I just wanted to reiterate that. So treatment plans must contain SMART goals. If you have questions about SMART goals, it's specific, measurable, attainable, timely. I forget what the R is, but they have to be SMART goals. And they have to be goals that are attainable for the client to be able to meet. The goals and objectives need to be written in a manner that is understandable by the individual, and if able, if we can put it in their own words, that's preferred. We have to identify the type of treatment, the frequency of treatment, and the duration of services. And so we provide outpatient services, Maybe you meet with someone once a week, maybe you meet with them twice a month, but that needs to be on the treatment plan somehow. And then the duration of the services, that just talks about when you're going to re-look at the treatment plan. So it has to be within the next 12 months. There is also, if you don't want to use the Colorado Access form, there's also another example in our policies and procedures of how to make a strength-based treatment plan. And again, you can find that under the HCC policies and procedures in Google Drive. So if you are working with someone who has different service providers that are very involved in their life, it could be really important for you to be able to talk with them. So a release is required for that. But then if you do talk with a physician, a social worker, a case manager, another therapist, you must document that. So anyone else that you talk to about the client, you have to document in some kind of progress note in TA. If you don't document, it didn't happen. So I can't stress enough your documentation. So document everything that you do, even if it's, I like to, even if my client is canceling and they send me a text message, I'll even document the text message in TA, because if we don't document it, it didn't happen. And then if all of a sudden you're not seeing the client for a long time, but there's no reason as to why, then Colorado Access may have some questions about that. So you just want to document all the communication that you have, because again, if it isn't documented, it doesn't happen. On slide 16 of the PowerPoint, if you're following along in the PowerPoint, it just talks about the confidentiality and HIPAA requirements that we have. Again, you may have already read through all of our HIPAA requirements and taken the HIPAA assessment or test. So this is just a little bit of a review, but again, everything is confidential, besides safety things. Depending on the age of the person, you know all of this. So, but the notice of privacy practices, the signed acknowledgement has to be in TA and uploaded into our documents. The release of information also has to be in TA. So everything needs to be scanned into TA. So if you are a therapist who's been with us for a while, what we're asking is that all of your current and new clients, all of that paperwork gets scanned into the therapy appointment. Any past clients that you may have discharged don't need to be scanned in. If you want to, that's great. But they need to be able to be accessible in case of an audit. But we're asking, from this point forward, any current or new clients, make sure all of your documentation of the required documentation that Access has is scanned into TA. So as therapy continues, there's different situations that may come up that I just wanted to make you guys aware of. So we'll talk about quality improvement, we'll talk about grievances, we'll talk about reporting, we'll talk about emergency after hours coverage, and we'll talk about some other needs that are kind of a miscellaneous. So Doug is our quality improvement and compliance officer. So if there is a grievance that comes to heart-centered counseling, Doug is the one who will be doing the investigation about the grievance, and he is required to get back to the clients within 15 days of have a written notice and a written agreement of how